Hey, this is Mary Jo Braddy. I am a student in EL 413 with Dr. Wallace. This is my video for structured versus balanced literacy. As someone who is teaching currently, I found this to be an incredibly informative session. I think that teaching reading has taken on a life of its own with the Alabama Literacy Act. I know this year we've seen a lot of pushback at some of the lower grade levels about advancing students who clearly are demonstrating an inability to grasp some of the more foundational components of reading, whether that's at the kindergarten, first grade, or second grade level. And I think that's important. I think it's relevant. Probably some of it should have been done long ago. But to get back to the assignment, structured versus balanced literacy. I found the balanced literacy information almost incredibly hard to digest. It is the equivalent to me of throwing somebody in a pool in order to teach them how to swim when they've had no foundation for it whatsoever, when they've not been taught how to tread water, when they don't know that the bottom is there, they don't know where the sides are, they don't know how to keep themselves safe. I think by and large, balanced literacy is effectively shoving children into an arena of study that they have no exposure to. Conceptually, the idea appears to be that you will activate some schema that they've had previously, but there's no guarantee that this is actually relevant or appropriate for the student. And then you're going to increase the academic standard by which you're holding them, or at which you're holding them accountable for the level at which they're reading. But there's no foundational training that's in place. It did not appear to me that there was a system for making sure that the children or the students had a basis for foundation and then a way to navigate forward from that. Structured literacy, on the other hand, some of the words that I read that as an educator, I just get really excited to see: explicit, systemic, cumulative, review, diagnostic. There's a way to approach teaching reading, and I think that structured literacy addresses it better. It's named for exactly what it is. It's a structure for teaching literacy to new readers. And that's profoundly important. Some of the things in the spear swirling article that I tapped into were that it's systematic and it's sequential. And so, prerequisites are taught first so that the student knows the basis for how to proceed. They're not just cast off into, this is the level you should be reading at. Here's your decodable text. We're going to push you to achieve some sort of academic vocabulary that you've not been introduced to yet. But, in balanced literacy, you've got the context clues and maybe some schema that you can tap into, but there's no guarantees. I know my dyslexic student would have been lost if that were the way that literacy was approached in my classroom. Because structured literacy is explicit, there is a clear set of instructions, a clear objective for what needs to be accomplished within a lesson. There's no guessing at what the teacher's expectations might be. You get the decodable text, you're going to answer the questions. You don't have to infer. There is just information, questions, and there are answers that can be gained. In terms of the prompt that we were given about a student reading connected text and making an error, there were several suggestions in the materials. Prompt corrective feedback is what I kept saying over and over again. Prompt corrective feedback. I have used a very quick interruption to correct a word. I have pointed and waited for a student to correct themselves. I know that sometimes students in their haste maybe misidentify a word or They're afraid to try and segment that word because they're not going to quite get it right. And that's where a teacher steps in and says, it's okay, we got this. Let's break it down. Let's slow it down a moment, and then let's break down that word that you tripped over or that you skipped over. Sometimes they just zip right over it. Using your ORIs and your ORFs early and on time. I have a reading coach in my school, or had. She's moved back into the classroom. Her mantra was early and on time. Early and on time. Because if you catch these problems, these potential pitfalls in reading early with your ORFs, there's so much that can be done to increase that student's fluency and to increase that student's automaticity. And so structured literacy relies on those diagnostics so that there can be interventions built in place for that student. Finally, I love hearing, I believe it's Dr. Hennessy from MTSU. I know she was at the Center for Dyslexia at the school. Her information was so thorough and so consistent. I believe I've heard her before. Can't place where. But again, I heard the words explicit and direct instruction. Dyslexic students require that intensive and sustained, sometimes redirection and sometimes correction in order to achieve the goal of reading for comprehension. Mastering decodable texts. Again, Dr. Hennessy hit on systematic, logical, orderly, and then laying the foundation of those prerequisites so that you know that you're putting your students in a position for success. Structured literacy is cumulative. Balanced literacy is less so. Balanced literacy is based on student ability. One of the things that I found very interesting was that when a balanced literacy approach is taken in a classroom, students are not grouped together based on their ability level. They might be grouped together based on a word count, grouped together based on a theme or a subject. This is disadvantageous for so many reasons, and how you assess that the word count is going to be the correct measuring stick for a certain group of students is just beyond me. I don't even know how that works. I found in some instances, homogeneous groups of skill level were the preferred way to work. Halfway through the school year, it became heterogeneous groups. And then once we completed our mid-year benchmark testing with iReady, I moved back to the homogeneous groups because I found that allowed me to spend more time with the groups that needed it, and the students were prepared to work alongside like-minded peers, or equally yoked, I guess you could say, peers. So this was a very enlightening lesson for me. I shudder to think the impact of balanced literacy, and that is completely my opinion, but structured literacy is exactly what it says it is. It is structured, it is timely, it is based on diagnostics, it is cumulative, and it lays a foundation of the prerequisites so that students can find success and not be discouraged when they are not capable of simply identifying context clues in academic or decodable texts that are not linked to anything that they understand. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the lesson.